In this video, we are going to add integers. Remember, an integer is a counting number, its opposite, and 0. So counting numbers are numbers like 1, 2, 3, etc. Their opposites are -1, -2, -3, etc., and 0. We begin integer addition with movement on the number line. We start at 0 on the number line. We draw a line to our first integer, and then starting at the first integer, we draw a second line. We go to the right if the second integer is positive, and we move to the left if the second integer is negative. In this example, we have 4 plus -2. We start our first line at 0 on the number line, and we move out to +4. Starting at the +4 for our second integer, it's a -2. Because the second integer is negative, we're going to move our arrow to the left 2 places. We end up at +2. So 4 plus -2 is equal to a +2. Okay, let's model a few more examples on the number line. We'll start with -8 plus 6. I start on the number line at 0, and I move to the left out to -8, my first integer. I'm going to add a +6, which means +6 I need to move right on the number line. So I'll move right on the number line to -2. So -8 plus +6 is equal to a -2. In my second example, 5 plus -9, I start at 0. I move to the right out to the number 5 on the number line. And then starting at the number 5, I need to move left on the number line 9 spaces. And 9 spaces left would put me at -4. So 5 plus -9 is equal to -4. In my last example, -1 plus -4, I start at 0, I move to -1 on the number line, and because I'm adding a -4, I'm going to continue to go left on the number line 4 more spaces, and I end up at -5. So -1 plus -4 is equal to -5. Now we'll come up with rules to add integers. In this set of problems, I'm going to add add-ins that are both negative. So I'm going to graph each set of these so we can figure out what the sum is, and I'll start at 0 for the first one, and I'll go to the left to -5, and then from -5 I'll go 2 more to the left, and I end up at -7. So -5 plus -2 is -7. For the next one, I start at 0, and I go to -3. From -3, I go 4 more to the left, and I end up at -7 as well. So -3 plus -4 is -7. And for the last problem, -8 plus -1, I start at 0. I go out to -8, and then from -8, I go 1 more to the left, and I end up at -9. So -8 plus -1 is -9. So now I look at my sums, and in the first one I have 5 plus 2. 5 plus 2 is 7, and it's negative because the two add-ins are both negative. In the second problem, -3 plus -4, the sum is -7. 3 plus 4 is 7, and it's negative because the two add-ins are both negative. And in the final problem, 8 plus 1 is 9, and it's a -9 because the two add-ins are both negative. So we could say when it's like signs, we add them together and take the sign they share. In this set of examples, we're going to add addends that have unlike signs. So one is going to be positive, one is going to be negative, and we're going to add them together and see if we can come up with a rule for unlike signs. We start with 4 plus negative 6. So starting at 0, I go to the right 4 places, and then starting at 4, I'm going to add negative 6, which means I'm going to go 6 to the left. And when I go 6 to the left, I end up at negative 2. So 4 plus negative 6 is negative 2. In the next example, negative 7 plus 9, I start at 0. I go to the left to negative 7. And now I'm going to add positive 9. So I'm going to go to the right 9 spaces. And I end up at a positive 2. So negative 7 plus 9 is equal to a positive 2. And for my third example, I start at 0, and it's 3 plus negative 10. So I'm going to go right to positive 3, and then I'm going to go left 10 spaces, and I'm going to end up at negative 7. So 3 plus negative 10 is negative 7. Now when we look at the sum of our two addends, it's actually the difference of our two addends. So if I take 6 minus 4, 6 minus 4 would be a 2. 9 minus 7, the difference would be a 2. And 10 minus 3, the difference would be 7. Now where does the sign come from? Well, I have in this example more negatives than positives, so my sum is going to be negative. In the second example, I have more positives than negatives, so my sum is going to be negative. And in the third example, I have more negatives than positives, so my sum is going to be negative. This leads us to the next rule for adding integers. So the rule is, unlike signs, subtract and take the sign of the larger number. For the final rule for adding integers, we're going to add opposites. And we can see the two problems I have. I'm adding opposites for 3 and negative 3, and the opposite of 8 is negative 8. So we start with the first one. At 0, I go left to negative 3, and I add positive 3, so I go right, and I end up back at 0. For the next problem, 8 plus negative 8, I start at 0. I go right to positive 8, and then I add a negative 8, which means I go left, and I end up again at 0. So 8 plus negative 8 is 0. So this leads us to our third and final rule for adding integers, which is opposites. The sum is going to always be 0. So to sum up our integer addition rules, for like signs, we add the absolute values and use their common sign. For unlike signs, we subtract the smaller number from the larger number and use the sign of the larger number. And for opposites, which are the additive inverses, the sum of an integer and its opposite is 0. That's the end of our integer addition lesson.